What is up, Ravens Flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and we are here to talk about Baltimore Ravens and their finances. You know, Glenn, everybody as a couple, individually, you have to deal with finances. The Baltimore Ravens are no different and had some breakups that they had to deal with. You know, there's always a fallout financially for the most part. There's always some sort of a resolution. The Baltimore Ravens have finally come to that. So before we get into all of that, take a second, hit the subscribe button, give us a like, turn your notifications. We are here for you guys. So let us know what you want us to talk about, what you don't want us to talk about, etc.
Yep.
Glenn, who are the two? Really quickly, I got my business attire on today because I know we're talking business.
Oh,
So who are we talking about today?
I didn't get the memo. I got a T-shirt on, so I wish I would have known. I would have dressed more appropriately. But yeah, the Ravens had a couple settlements that they were dealing with. One of which was Earl Thomas, which dates back a couple years. That, man, it's kind of ridiculous that it takes this long for resolution. Like it's unbelievable how long things can seem to take when it comes to NFL business. But the
Think about
Ravens,
it. I've had a baby and he's 9 months old since then.
yeah, like, and I'm pretty sure your wife's entire pregnancy was during this grievance.
Right.
So it's crazy that we're still talking about an Earl Thomas situation, but the grievance was over the Ravens voiding his $10 million base salary due to conduct detrimental to the team when he got in the fist fight with Chuck Clark in practice and sucker punched him. Of course, they released him as soon as that happened, and they attempted to avoid his $10 million base salary due to the conduct detrimental to the team. So almost 2 years after that happened, they finally settled, and the settlement is $1.5 million in dead cap space, counting it now against the Ravens. So while that $10 million wasn't necessarily hitting the Ravens cap, they also had to make sure that they were prepared for the possibility that Earl would have won the case. Even though I'm sure they were confident, they had to at least be prepared for somewhere between $1 and $10 million was gonna come out of their cap. But I gotta say, the Ravens have to look at this as a win in that it's just $1.5 million, right?
Yeah, 50. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, what's that? 15%, right?
Yeah.
Of the actual total is what he's getting. And at the end of the day, think about this for Earl. This is probably between this situation in court and settlement and his other situations in court. This is probably just legal fees.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
I mean, it's not like he's making money off this. I mean, he's maybe breaking even, right? Not even considering all the money he's now lost. But yeah, I'm happy with the Ravens and in that so what it is it's one, like Glenn said, it's 1.5 against the cap this year, but the Ravens had already had a contingency plan in place. Now, the one good thing as far as the other player goes, and maybe we'll get back to Earl in a second, but Derek Wolfe's injury settlement came down to, let's see, the original was 1.2, right? Isn't that what?
No, it was 2 million. And
right.
They settled at 1.2.
Right. Yeah. So the original was 2 million. They settled 1.2. So the savings was $800,000 for the Baltimore Ravens. So if you look at it this way, we were charged 1.5 million, saved 800 million. It's an overall difference.
800,000. Yeah.
Or 800,000. Oh, 800 million. Whoo. So it's a delta of 700,000 that the Ravens have to pay out at the end of the day. Yeah. Not a bit now. 700,000, a lot of money to you and I. However, not that big of a deal for the Baltimore Ravens. And something they were preparing on. So they got out of this thing relatively unscathed and ready to move forward. And this does something really important. This now frees up the money that they need in total salary cap that they have available to them to sign the remaining rookies. You had the total number, right, Glenn, that they had left?
Yeah. Currently the Ravens have $3.27 million in available cap space, which is enough to sign their remaining unsigned draft picks. But not a ton to have in the bank. Teams always like to have a couple million laying around because injuries, when you see guys get hurt, even IR, they're still counting against the cap. So it's not like if something were to happen to some of these guys who are returning from injury, if something were to happen to those guys, it's not like their cap money just disappears and they're not counted against. No. So you need to have a couple million left to the side to sign
Right.
a veteran to replace. I mean, it's only a matter now. We're hoping the Ravens don't get killed with injuries like they did last year, but there's gonna be injuries. That's the nature of the business and the sport in NFL, in NFL football. So you got to make sure you have some money left aside, for the what if.
100%. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Ravens work their cap with the remaining amount that they have, and whether or not they're motivated to continue to open up some additional money
That's the
for the
question.
what if, like you said. Yeah. Now, really, really quickly before we dig into that, I just want to ask you this, Glenn. Does the way that Earl Thomas's career has seemingly ended, because I don't think he gets re-signed at this point, does this ruin his chances of having a gold jacket?
Man, that's a tough. I still think he gets in because the NFL is very specific when they talk about entries to the NFL Hall of Fame. It's supposed to be only on the field performance and not based off anything off the field. So while we've heard some recent news, even a couple of months ago, Earl Thomas is having still some off the field issues, and so he's got a lot going on. But that shouldn't be considered when they're voting for his Hall of Fame, induction. And if you just look at what he's done on the field, I mean, it's hard to argue. This guy is a Super Bowl champion. He's a multiple-time All-Pro, multi-time Pro Bowler. He was the best at his position for a few years, and I think that's good enough in my book. If you're the best at your position for a few-year period, how can you not go in the Hall of Fame? I mean, that should be. I always look around and I say, well, was this guy the top of his position at any point in his career? And that's kind of how I judge whether you're a Hall of Famer. And he certainly was for a good period of time, and he's a Super Bowl champ. So I think he ultimately gets in, but I don't think, because I heard that he also wants to resume a playing career. I don't think that that's going to be in the cards for Earl.
Yeah, no, for sure. The only thing that I think of, I agree with what you said. The only thing I think of is and I guess he might not have as strong of a case as Earl, but you think of a guy like Chad Johnson, he has more touchdowns, receptions, and yards than 5 Hall of Fame wide receivers. And all three of those things. So like, I always wonder how much, while they say like off the field stuff isn't a factor, there's no reason that a guy like Terrell Owens shouldn't have been a first ballot. Right.
Like, 100%.
You know what I mean? So that's the only thing that has me questioning.
But he did get in.
He did get in, but it was enough of a slap in the face that he wasn't a first ballot. I mean, the dude destroyed a whole Patriots team on a broken leg. Like, what? So
and
anyway,
plus he had no off the field issues.
Right.
He never got arrested. He never
all
got
he did was work out.
That's it. That's it. He was obnoxious. Let's call it what it is. He had some obnoxious moments, and his teammates didn't always love him. But but I mean, I think as far as Earl Thomas goes, he's got to get in.
Because where do you draw the line if not? You know what I mean? And I'm not here to sound like I'm defending Earl Thomas. The dude is obviously a relatively despicable person as far as we can see off the field, right?
Yeah, he's got a lot of issues.
Like you said, Glenn, you have to, just like the separation of church and state, right? Yeah. Like you have to separate on and off the field at a certain extent. And the NFL has said it's all about on the field. If you want to include off the field stuff, that should be part of the criteria, right? But don't change the target. So I think I agree with you there based on the parameters. I'm not here to say I'm defending Earl Thomas, but as a football player, they vote. Exactly. So that'll be interesting to see moving forward. But I think that what you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think there's some other ways because they're going to need to create some cap space.
That's what I was going to add. Okay, good.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways they can do it. Ja'Wuan James is one guy that let's see. I'm going to change this to post June 1 since we are post June 1. So if they cut Ja'Wuan James right now, Ja'Wuan James is slotted in as the primary backup to Morgan Moses at the right tackle position. Mm-hmm. But they do have Daniel Faalele, and so and they still have. They still have Tyree Phillips. They still have Patrick McCarry. Mm-hmm. So they got some other options. And so they could create an additional $2.75 million in cap space by just releasing Ja'Wuan James. So that's a substantial number. That's not just a couple bucks. That's a good amount. And then they could also, if they cut Ben Powers, they could roughly get about $2.3 million in cap savings. So those two moves right there alone would be enough to cover if you needed to add some veterans later on in the season. If there's a rash of injuries at a specific position, there's some spots. And then there's also some guys some lower level guys. Josh Oliver would save a little over $1 million if they cut him, which is a likely. I mean, let's be honest, that's a crowded room in the tight end room. So even though he's had some moments even last year, but also in camp, we heard his name a bunch. I still look at him as a guy who's pretty likely to get cut, and they can save $1 million there. So there's still some spots that they could add some additional cap space for the what if situations, which I think we both anticipate in them doing so.
Yeah. So to me, it's all going to come down to context, right? Like who's available in the market, what options do they have out there? Look, and the other thing I think that's being discounted is that Eric DeCosta will turn over every leaf and every rock. And so if there's a trade, if there's a trade for a guy that then wants a new deal, that also might prompt some of this slashing of salary cap, right? To create more space, because you got to bring a guy in that might be on the last year of his rookie deal or whatever the circumstances might be, but his salary cap hit might be higher. So I think the two things to consider will be who ends up getting cut late or who's out there, what injuries are there to the Baltimore Ravens, while we're hoping we avoid all of them, trying to be as realistic as possible, and or what trade options there are.
Yeah, and of course, Lamar Jackson, if he signs a deal, that's going to free up a ton of cap space, because right now he's slotted $23 million against the cap, and that number would certainly go down if they found a long-term extension.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point as well. So I guess my question to you, Glenn, is that do you really think the Baltimore Ravens, I think to me the position of weakness depth-wise, not talent, depth-wise, is wide receiver. If Rashad Bateman goes down, we're in big problems. So do you think the Ravens really go into the season, I'm not going to say training camp, but maybe the season like this?
Man, that's the $1 million question, Jimbo, because I agree with you. That is a scary proposition. If something were to happen to Bateman, which in his first year, something happened to him. So you can only, like they say, you can only, kind of try and predict the future by reviewing the past. And so there's at least a decent likelihood that he's going to maybe miss a couple games. And that would be terrifying, because then you have Devin Duvernay as your number one, Prochet as your number two, and then Tylan Wallace as your three. And that's man, I mean, it's a lot of this is what if, they may take advantage of it and they may play well, or the lights might be a little too bright. The moment and position might be a little too big for these guys, and maybe they struggle. And if you struggle, especially in the beginning, then it becomes a mental game. And a lot of sports is about confidence. And if if say they get thrust in that position and have an early drop, or have then it starts becoming a mental thing. And who knows how long it takes to kind of get out of your own way when it goes upstairs. So, man, that's I think. It's just it's so scary, because while I want to run with these guys and I want to have hope and confidence that these guys can get it done, because I think the talent's there, it's still a relatively unknown situation.
Yeah, it's just a tough one to be in, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this thing plays out overall. But we're glad the Earl Thomas saga is over. The Derek Wolfe situation, while brief, is over. He could go hopefully live a normal, healthy life to the point where he's doing what he wants to do. Apparently hunting.
Oh, and hunting's a big part of his life. But let's also hope that if there's any other off the field issues, any legal problems going forward with Earl Thomas, can they put him in a Seahawks uniform when they put his picture up? I'm about tired of every time he gets into trouble, they show him in the Ravens uniform. He was only here for a little bit of time. Okay. He's a Seahawk. All right, let's put him in the Seahawks uniform if we're talking about off the field issues, because he's more of a Seahawk than he was a Raven.
That's right. When he goes in the hall, it's going to be as a Seahawk.
Exactly. So let's stop putting up pictures of him as a Raven every time he steps in some trouble off the field, because I'm getting a little tired of it.
All right, guys. Well, let us know what you think. You happy the Ravens got that over with? I'm sure you are as well. But really, the question is, will they create more salary cap space? Will it be to contribute to the wide receiver room? How do you think you see the Ravens handling this early part of the preseason? Offseason's over. The preseason and constructing this roster. Let us know all your comments below, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you.